sugar daddies. Is there anything wrong with sugar dating? It's where young women are lavished with money, expensive gifts, good meals out by older, wealthy men, and then they're called sugar daddies. And the idea is it's in exchange for companionship. Read into that what you will. We're wondering whether there's any risks, though. There's been a documentary on this. I don't know whether you've seen it. It's been on the BBC. Reporter Tiffany Sweeney posed as a sugar babe. We spoke to her earlier on. And she told us she very quickly realised that the issue of paying for sex was paramount.
I'm 49, so you'd have to be attracted to an older man and be very open-minded and a pleaser. Oh my gosh.
The sugar daddy suggests we chat off the website.
I'm going to give my number and see what they have to say.
Within minutes, he contacts me on WhatsApp.
I'm looking for a girl I can get to know and become friends with. That's important for me. I'd like to meet them 3 to 4 times a month and we could spend time together with a few hours of intimacy, kiss. Interesting.
It's not long before he's asking me to break the rules.
To begin with, as we get to know each other, are you okay with a pay-per-meet arrangement? I would suggest £150, which is what he's done in previous arrangements. Look how easy it is. There's a website that just opens them up to so many young girls.
And actually, according to the world's biggest sugar dating site, which is called Seeking Arrangements, more than 1,000 people from Kent have signed up as sugar babies, which is what they're called as opposed to sugar daddies. Tiffany spoke to Brandon Wade, who is the founder of that website.
Do you think sugar babies are having pay-per-meet arrangements?
That's just another sort of short form for perhaps escorting, because what you're doing is you're paying somebody to spend time with them. And that is, in our mind, escorting, and that's not permitted on our website.
All of the sugar babies that I've spoken to say they do pay-per-meets. Mm-hmm. Do you accept that you are facilitating sex for money on your website?
No, absolutely not. And that's the problem, right? Because any dating website, you're gonna find that aspect to it. I have pictures upon pictures on my phone of Tinder screenshots and Bumble screenshots where the women are clearly soliciting sex for money. But is that the intent of Tinder or Bumble? No.
Let's discuss this now with Dr. Sasha Rakoff from Not Buying It, which is a campaign set up to try and stop the porn and sex trade being normalised, and Elizabeth Hobson from Justice for Men and Boys. Starting with you, Dr. Sasha, this might be a naive question, but if your campaign is all about stopping porn and sex being normalised, does that have anything to do with sugar daddy dating?
Oh, well, yeah, obviously, as we heard from those quotes, and anyone who saw that show. And, this has been going on for years. I remember doing interviews about this about a year ago. I think somebody broke it in the press 2 years before that. And still nothing has changed. And it's just part of this much wider spectrum where girls, especially university students, are doing every aspect of the porn and sex industry, whether it's webcam work, strip clubs, escorting, or we have these sort of sex for rent, which is also being talked about quite a lot, like on Craigslist, which is appalling. So you get very cheap or free room in exchange for your companionship. So the kind of language they use, I know at the Sugar Baby Summit, they call it a finishing school. So the kind of language they use to try and disguise what it's all really about is absolutely ridiculous.
But you heard from Mr. Wade there, and he said, well, that kind of stuff happens on Tinder and stuff. You can't really stop it. The idea is not that you pay for sex. The idea is that you meet and have companionship. In that case, should we still feel uncomfortable about it if there are some girls simply just spending time with older men?
Well, I think probably that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's always called companionship. The language is always used to disguise what's really going on. Just like strip club operators always say it's really strictly regulated. It turns out sexual contact is the norm there. So you can't regulate any of this, basically.
Right.
Just shut it all down.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, where do we go from here? If we know that students are doing it, if you know they're doing it to fund their studies, but presumably no law is being broken or anything like that.
I think that's debatable. I mean, you could talk about inciting prostitution and pimping, which is what the men who run these things and making a huge amount of money off the backs of women are doing. They're pimping, basically. There's ways around it. You make a new law if you have to. And certainly we need to go into universities and other places and start talking to the students there and talk to them about the problems and the issues they're going to face, because it's not just about it possibly being prostitution. You're talking about sexual assault, coercion, rape. You know, these are very entitled men. Many of them think they have literally bought a woman to do whatever they want with her. And only 2% of rapists, as far as I'm aware, ever see the inside of a prison cell. So what chance do you have of justice if some man does rape you under those circumstances?
Let's bring in Elizabeth now from Justice for Men and Boys. What's your take on all of this, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be disingenuous to try and differentiate between the sugar dating phenomenon and prostitution. I think it absolutely is prostitution. But, you know, I think what I took from the programme was the fact that it is going to happen, whether in a covert form or an overt form. And so, you know, the question we have to ask is how we augment sex workers' freedoms and safety. And I think the answer is pretty clear, and it's not the answer that Sasha's come up with.
Go on.
If you compare the situations in New Zealand, where prostitution's been fully decriminalised, as compared to Sweden, where clients have been criminalised, you see 90% of prostitutes in New Zealand reporting that decriminalisation gave them more rights in terms of employment, healthcare, legal and safety rights. Whereas in Sweden, only a tiny minority say that they would now report a violent attack because they fear prejudicial treatment from authorities.
That's really interesting. Sasha, what do you make of that?
Well, I would totally dispute that. In every country that's legitimised prostitution by basically turning pimps into businessmen, we've seen massive increases in sex trafficking, in violence against women, in prostitution, and violence against women outside of it. We've actually got a so-called managed zone in this country, in Leeds, where it's a red light district, basically, which has been legitimised. You've seen a massive increase in the abuse of women in it. Women are selling themselves now for £5 a shot. You're seeing women being trafficked from all over the country into it. You're seeing men coming from all over the country to use the women there. There have been rapes and murders, several, in connection to it. So this idea that turning pimps into legitimate businessmen, which is basically what this model suggests, decriminalisation, is the worst possible thing you could do for any woman involved in prostitution. The solution is that you criminalise pimps and, to an extent, punters to act as a deterrent, and you get the women out, because 90% of women in prostitution, they want to get out.
Yeah, I mean, I put it to you, Elizabeth, that actually prostitution is hugely damaging to women for a myriad of reasons, some of which Sasha's mentioned, some of which we haven't spoken about. It can't be encouraged, can it?
I don't think it needs to be encouraged, but I think we need to be realistic, you know, about the fact that it's gone on for as long as, you know, civilization has gone on.
So have wars.
Longer. And, you know, I dispute the so-called facts that Sasha's brought up there about, you know, liberalisation of the laws leading to more abuse of women. That's the complete opposite to everything I've ever read.
Okay, well, we're going to have to leave it there. Interesting points both, though. Thank you.